2023, and this is the 41st episode of the College Basketball Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and tonight I'm joined by Chuck Asetta, and tonight Chuck and I will go over the Big East, all 11 teams. So, Chuck, we're going to start off first with the Butler Bulldogs. We're going in alphabetical order. We're going to go to Indianapolis first. Last year in Thad Matta's first year, Butler was 14-18 overall and 6-14 in the Big East. That was good enough for ninth. They do lose a whole lot of contributors from a year ago. Jaden Taylor, Simas Lukosius, Manny Bates, Chuck Harris, Eric Hunter, all gone. They all averaged over 8 points a game. They do bring in as many transfers back. DJ Davis from UC Irvine, Posh Alexander from St. John's, Jameel Telfort from Northeastern, Pierre Brooks from Michigan State, and Landon Moore from St. Francis, along with a couple of freshmen. So, Chuck, year one for Butler wasn't great. Where do you think the expectations for the Bulldogs should be in year two?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be high expectations with this Butler team. You look at their roster and I don't really see any super great talent. So I kind of expect them to finish towards the bottom of the Big East again, unless Thad Matta can pull off some miracle. I kind of like Posh Alexander, St. John's, but he never really developed a consistent enough game for me to be like, oh wow, he's a guy that can really win you a lot of games in the Big East. And Jameel Telfort, I kind of followed him a little bit at Northeastern because one of my friends plays there, and he's very solid. He's a very solid player, but you know those are pretty much the only two names that really stick out to me, and those aren't two names that are gonna win you many games in the Big East. So
Yeah,
yeah, I don't think there's a lot of expectation there.
they weren't very good last year, and they lose almost all of their good players from that team. So I have them 10th out of 11, and I think that it could be a rough one for the Bulldogs. It really stinks because it is one of the great programs of all time, and with their arena, I've seen a game there. It is one of the most unique and cool arenas to watch a game. But I have to agree with you. I think maybe they find something with Posh or Pierre Brooks because he was I recruit, but I can't see them putting together a season where they end up in the tournament. They could maybe a couple nice upsets during the season, but I can't really see them making the tournament. So just a quick look at the analytics, the preseason analytics for them. Butler is all the way at the bottom here. I got to scroll down. 118th in Bart Torvik, 125 in both offense and defense. And in Ken Pom, they're a little better at 96th, but that is plenty of indication as to where Butler is supposed to finish. So could be a really tough year in Indianapolis. The next team in the Big East is going to be the defending champions, the Connecticut Huskies. Last year they were 31-8, 13-7 overall. They did win the national title, but they were fourth in the Big East. It's Dan Hurley's sixth season in stores. Such a successful season a year ago. They do lose a number of players. Adam Asinogo, Jordan Hawkins, Andre Jackson, Joey Calcaterra, and Naheem Aline are all gone. They do bring in a number of freshmen and transfer Cam Spencer from Rutgers. Chuck, UConn is ranked number 5 in the AP poll. The Big East is very stacked this year, but they should have expectations to have another successful season, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think that while they lost a lot of great pieces, they have a lot of great pieces coming back. I think Alex Caravan is going to be huge for them. Donovan Clingan, his production and the limited amount of minutes that he played was fantastic. So I think he's going to be expected to make a huge jump. Stephon Castle, Jalen Stewart, all their freshmen, um, you class is very good and probably one of the better ones that we've seen in recent years for UConn. And then there's just that one guard who I've seen play in person multiple times. Teams that I've worked for, we've matched up against them multiple times. And Cam Spencer, you know, he's an experienced guard, and that's what wins you basketball games. Him and Tristan Newton as a backcourt, that experienced backcourt is going to win them a lot of games. And Cam Spencer, I can't say enough about him. I've seen him score 20 plus points in multiple games against teams that I've worked with, and he's just an unbelievable player. And he's going to find his way in the Big East for sure. So
Yeah, UConn might not have the two squads worth of decent teams that they've had last year, but Klingon moving into a bigger role might be better for him. I said this yesterday with some of the Penn State players, but Zach Edey was a platoon guy for his first 2 years and played 18 minutes a game and was really good. And once he got 30 minutes a game, he became the best player in the country. So I don't know if that sort of rises on the table for Klingon, but there's a lot to be excited about. And what he showed last year, which was good, but he only averaged 13 minutes a game. So, if you can bump that up to 26, 27, I think you're looking at one of the better players in the conference. Spencer can score it, even on a team that couldn't score it last year in Rutgers. So this conference is really good. So I've got them finishing third, but last year they finished fourth and won the national championship. So I think UConn, a lot to be excited about. Gonna go watch them when they play Indiana at the Garden in a couple weeks. So that'll be really good. And then Texas and Louisville are all on the other side in that game. So if Connecticut could win, and then they would play Texas, and that would be a big game. So they'll be tested early, but they were really great early last year. Then they hit a wall, lost a bunch of games in a row. Tough. Played some good teams at the wrong time, and then they turned back into that awesome team that we saw. So a lot to be excited about for UConn again. The next team we'll go to here is the Creighton Blue Jays. Last year they were 24-13, 14-6 in the Big East. That was third. They did lose in the Elite Eight. This is Greg McDermott's 14th season in charge in Omaha. They do lose two very solid players in Ryan Nembhard to Gonzaga and Arthur Kaluma. They do bring in a couple of transfers, Jonathan Lawson, Isaac Trott, and Stephen Ashworth from Utah State. And they return some really solid players in Ryan Kalkbrenner, Baylor Shireman, and Trey Alexander. So, Chuck, a lot to be excited about, like UConn, a lot to be excited about for Creighton this year.
yeah, this team definitely has the potential to win the Big East, and I don't think that's even a question. I always love watching Creighton teams. I love last year's team, but I think losing Nembhard is obviously a big loss, but Stephen Ashworth is an unbelievable pickup, one of the best shooters in the country. I think he's going to be huge. And then the fact that you could return the three guys of Trey Alexander, Baylor Shireman, and Ryan Kalkbrenner, I mean, that's just those four guys, let alone the other transfers that they brought in. That's just an unbelievable core that you have. And I think there is just so much excited about our Creighton team. Greg McDermott has obviously proven he's one of the best coaches in the country. Bring that team to the Elite Eight last year. Obviously they did have a lot of talent, but you just feel like Creighton's always just a really solid team, and they definitely have the star power this year to win the Big East. And I know they're picked second in the Big East poll, but it wouldn't surprise me if they beat out Marquette for that first spot.
Yeah, they will have similar issues to what they did last year. I think they were not very deep, and then Kalkbrenner went down, and they basically had to change the entire way that they played because their defense kind of funneled everything into him, and then he would erase shots in the paint. And when you're not there, they lost a couple of games to some teams that weren't very good. But you have Farabello, you have King on the bench. That's going to be really big for them. They've got to establish some rotation early on in the year so that if somebody does go down, you don't turn into a 100 ranked team because it was night and day how bad they were without him and how good they are with him. I believe he was the defensive player of the year last year and might be up there for votes for player of the year too. So I have them winning the conference. I think that they got a lot better as the year went on. Remember last year they had so much hype, and then they were pretty good early, and then they lost I think 4 or 5 games in a row, and then they started to find it again towards the end of the year. They did end up getting a 6 seed, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they were
They,
five,
they
five or
beat
six.
they beat Baylor.
Yeah.
But yeah, Shireman's got a full year in the conference, and Alexander's back, and I think that this team can win the Big East and should be right there if they don't. So the next team on the list in the Big East is the DePaul Blue Demons, 10-23 and 3-17 a year ago. Tony Stubblefield back for year 3 in stint 2. They do lose a lot of players. I'm not going to read them off because it's a ton. They do bring in 5 transfers: Chico Carter from South Carolina, Elijah Fisher from Texas Tech, Jeremiah Oden from Wyoming, Jaden Henley from Minnesota, and Mac Etienne from UCLA. So, Chuck, DePaul has been in the basement of this conference forever. Is there any signs that might not be the case this year?
Yeah, no, I think they're gonna remain right in that basement of the Big East. I honestly would be a liar if I said I knew anything about this team and anything, about the players on this team. I watched, Mac Etienne in limited minutes at UCLA, and that's honestly about it. A couple years ago, Tony Stubblefield's first year, they had Javon Freeman Liberty, and he was a great player to watch. He was a lot of fun to watch, high scorer, but I thought maybe after that year, maybe they could turn the program around, but it's just not looking good for them, and it's a hard place to win. It's a shame, because it could be. Chicago obviously is a great basketball city, but it's just hard to win there. It's hard to bring in talent. So I think they're going to remain right at the bottom of the Big East, unfortunately. So
Yeah, I've got them last also. Anything better than ninth would be a tremendous success for the Blue Demons. Like you said, that year that they did have, or the couple of years that they had Freeman Liberty, he was awesome, but they still were not out of the eighth or ninth spot in the conference. So, it could be and probably will be a tough season for the Blue Demons, but they always have that one. I feel like they always have that one win every year that it's like, really? Like,
absolutely.
you couldn't beat DePaul at home, but hopefully for them they can make some noise, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Next team, Chuck, we got here Georgetown Hoyas, new coach Ed Cooley at the helm. They're 7-25 a year ago, 2-18 in the conference. They lose a number of players, most notably Primo Spears, Brandon Murray, Qudus Wahab. They do bring in a number of transfers: Jaden Epps from Illinois, Dontrez Styles from North Carolina, Ismail Massoud from Kansas State, Supreme Cook from Fairfield, Rowan Brumbaugh from Texas, and freshman Drew Fielder from Idaho. So Cooley has pretty much got a complete clean slate here with Georgetown. And is success simply just better than last year for the Hoyas this year?
Yeah, I mean, if Ed Cooley can win 15 games, I think that's a huge win for the Hoyas program. I think they have talent. They definitely have talent. And you know, Jaden Epps had 46 in their secret scrimmage against I believe Wake Forest or whoever they played, and they have guys. Obviously, Supreme Cook. He's one of my best friends, and I talk to him pretty frequently, and I think everything's going well down in Georgetown. But it's kind of a hard team to predict because you could see them winning games, but at the same time, you don't know. You just don't know how they're going to be this year. So you know, I hope we get to see Georgetown be good again because growing up watching college basketball, Georgetown was always a great team, and obviously maybe they didn't have great tournament success, but you always would hear about the Georgetown history and just for all of college basketball, I'd like to see them back to their old selves. But I think this year is going to be a step in the right direction, for sure for them. And I do think they'll win games, but I'll see them for sure, and I could see them in the middle of the pack for sure, maybe towards the bottom half of the pack, but I think they'll be all right. So
Yeah, they have been very irrelevant for a while now, and Ewing probably got the extra year because of that crazy run through the Big East tournament when there was no fans, and then they got smoked by Colorado in the tournament. But I don't think anybody really doubts that Cooley will get it going, but making the NCAA tournament might be too tall an ask this year for the Hoyas. It's just you look at the really top six, maybe even top seven in the Big East right now, and they could play really well and still not break into that top seven. And eight of 11 teams, 8 teams from an 11-team conference to make the tournament. That's a lot, and there is a way that can happen, but that includes a lot of teams not being great and a lot of teams kind of just being good to okay. And I don't think the Big East wants that, and I don't think it's going to happen because they've got a couple teams that are going to be up there in the best teams in the country. But they have some players who've done it at other places. Jaden Epps I thought was really good at Illinois last year, and he, as a freshman, he showed that he was not like other freshmen. He was ready, and he was a dog. And Masood had that great run through the tournament with Kansas State, but he also came off the bench for them. So you're going to have players doing a little more than what they did before. And, we talked about Supreme. Jug, he was one of the best players in the MAC last year, but now he's going up against Kalk Brenner and Klingon and some of the best bigs every day in the country. So we'll see how he adjusts. It'll be way tougher for him than some of the guys in the MAC were. But I would say 500 is a attainable but also pretty good goal for the Hoyas. Maybe sneak into the NIT. They do, just looking at their non-conference schedule here, they do play Rutgers on the road, TCU at home, and Notre Dame on the road, and Syracuse at home. So it's not as if they're playing nobody, but those teams aren't supposed to be great either. So maybe you get a couple of these non-conference games against some power conference opponents and see where it goes. But it says a lot about this conference. I think that Georgetown is not really in the picture, and we're still talking about the Big East being back, or at least up there with some of the best in the country. And I think it'll happen soon. And the next team we're going to go to is Marquette, 29-7 and 17-3. Last year they did win the Big East, but they did lose in the round of 32 to Michigan State. This is Shaka Smart's third season at the helm at the Fiserv Forum. They do lose Olivier Maxence Prosper. He's a really solid player, but they do return 4 of the 5 starters a year ago. Cam Jones, Tyler Kolek, Stevie Mitchell, David Joplin, Oso Ighodaro, all back. After sort of disappointing in the NCAA tournament last year, after being so great for the whole year, Marquette should be back in the top of the conference again.
yeah, they they'll be in that 1-2 spot for sure. Um, you know, maybe maybe not for sure. They'll definitely be in the top three, in my opinion. When you're led um, by a guard like Tyler Kolek, um, that's something really special. maybe not like play style, but but someone he kind of reminds me of just the way he's able to win and the way he's able to run the point guard is kind of Cassius Winston in a way. Cassius was obviously a great point guard, led those Michigan State teams to a lot of wins, and I kind of see Tyler Kolek in that same light. Doing distributing the basketball, being able to score the basketball. He's a really great player, and having a leader on that like your team on a leader like that on your team is really significant. And especially him coming into his what junior senior year what um you know he's an experienced guard and that's invaluable in college basketball. So
Yeah, I don't know if you can really describe the impact that he has on the game. He's many people's picks for player of the year in the conference, and his stats he'll average like 13 points a game and 7 assists and 5 rebounds or something like that. But that won't even begin to explain what impact he has. He's very unique, 6'3". He's pretty big, but he's also not slow at all. And last year he was 39% from downtown. So the team runs through him. They have all of their starters are pretty good, especially their guards. But everything runs through him, and he's not the entire team. If he does go down, I still think they're probably a top 25 team, but he's the reason why they're at the top of the conference, and people are picking them to win the conference. Now, you said like they could still have a pretty solid season and finish third or fourth just because there's a couple teams that could be in the top 5 in the country, including them, but they've got a real chance to win the conference. I have them just losing out to Marquette, but it should be a great race for the regular season title, and season hasn't even started yet, but I can already look forward to Madison Square Garden in March for that Big East tournament because it's going to be pretty epic.
absolutely.
So the next team, we've got the Providence Friars, 21-12, 13-7. A year ago, they tied for 4th in the conference. They did lose in the round of 64. It's Kim English's first season at the AMP. Ed Croswell, Noah Locke, Jared Bynum, Alan Breed, and Clifton Moore have transferred out. But English gets a couple of players coming in. Josh Aduro, Ticket Gaines, and Justin Fernandez, all from his old school, George Mason, and they get a couple highly ranked freshmen led by Garway Dual. This is a little bit of an interesting situation, Chuck, because most teams that have new coaches are that way because of, past lack of results, but not Providence. They've been up there at the top of the conference here for a number of years, and they do return their 2 best players from a team that made the tournament, Bryce Hopkins and Devin Carter. So I certainly think that the expectation for English in year 1 should be to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. Um, you know, Bryce Hopkins is an unbelievable player. I really loved what he did last year. It's just I think the biggest question mark with this team is how are those George Mason transfers going to translate to the Big East? You could bring guys back like Bryce Hopkins, Devin Carter, and maybe expect a little bit of a jump from Jaden Pierre in a bigger role, and maybe a good freshman season by Garway Dual. But Providence's sorry, Providence's success is going to be very dependent on how those George Mason transfers play in the Big East, and if they can get it going, Providence is going to be a great team, and they could finish in the top 4 or 5 of the conference. If they struggle to make that jump from the Atlantic 10 to the Big East, then they might struggle a little bit and might finish in that 6, 7, 8 range. So, you know, I think Kim English is he's going to be all right. He's bringing a lot of energy to the Providence fan base, and I think he's going to be a great recruiter and bring a lot of great talent into Providence. But I it's hard to kind of say my expectations until they kind of those George Mason transfers and along with Kim English kind of proves something to me. So
Yeah.
this is definitely a team with a bit of a question mark on it for sure.
Yeah, I think it could go either way. You know, this is the only team with a new coach that is not the coach wasn't fired. So I think expectations will be a little higher for English, maybe or definitely higher than Cooley, and maybe higher than Patino too. Hopkins and Carter should do it. You know what you're going to get from them. They're both really good, and Hopkins is a really unique player, the way that he plays the four, and he might be the five at times, but he certainly doesn't play like it. And Carter, one of the best two-way players in the country, but there's going to be nights where somebody else is going to have to do it, and that'll be the difference, whether they're a 4 or 5 seed come NCAA tournament time or a 1 seed in the NIT. But George Mason wasn't great in the A10, and there certainly are some question marks coming from that. But at least from the public's point of view, Kim English seemed to be one of their first, if not their first call when the job became open. So going to be interesting for Providence. I think that they should make the tournament in year one, and I think they ultimately will. So we'll go a little bit south to the Seton Hall Pirates, 17-16 and 10-10. A year ago, they did lose in the NIT. This is Shaheen Holloway's second season in charge at the Prudential Center. Do have a drastically different roster from a year ago. Tyrese Samuel, Casey Andefo, Femi Odekale, Trey Jackson, Alexis Yetna, and Jameer Harris have all transferred out, but they do replace a number of those players with freshmen and transfers. Dylan Adaiwusu is in from St. John's, Elijah Hutchins Everett from Austin Peay, Jaden Bediako from Santa Clara, and then 4 freshmen. Before we talk about this year for Seton Hall, Chuck, how would you grade last year for Seton Hall? New coach, but like Providence last year, Willard wasn't fired. He took the Maryland job. So I think maybe slightly underwhelming, but no super panic mode yet for the Pirates. But how would you grade the Pirates season a year ago?
Yeah, I would say underwhelming is probably the best word for it. I think Shaheen Holloway coming off that Elite Eight run with St. Peter's, I think expectations were, I wouldn't say they were win the Big East high, but they were definitely expected to do something and be a lot better than they were, in my opinion. I think they could have been a lot better than they were, and unfortunately, it just didn't click. I think Shaheen Holloway and his coaching style, he has to have the right type of players under him in order for it to work. And I'm not sure if the Seton Hall players last year, obviously, I wasn't there, but I'm curious as to how the returning Seton Hall players were receptive to it. And I think Shaheen's an unbelievable coach. And he's a great guy from all my interactions with him. Um, but I think they probably should have won a couple more games. And I think, their loss in the Big East tournament, I think not winning a game in that Big East tournament was a huge disappointment. And especially losing to DePaul was I don't want to call it humiliating, but they should have done more. They should have at least advanced to a second round game in that tournament. So yeah, I would say underwhelming is probably the perfect word for it.
Yeah, I would say as a baseline, I think you need to have a better year than a year before, and it might take some time. You've got a ton of new players, but if you look at their roster, their top 5 players in projected impact are all seniors, and you've got a couple other freshmen and sophomores who are pretty highly ranked. So you're going to have an old team in Seton Hall, and that seems like that's right up Coach Holloway's alley. His guys can guard, they can win a dogfight, they can win a half-court game, they can win an up-and-down game. But I think it will come down to their offense again, because last year their offense really, really struggled at times, and when you're a good defensive team only, you're just going to lose some games because sometimes teams have it that day and they're knocking down threes, and you want to be able to at least have a chance in those games. But I think the key player for them is Kadari Richmond. He's been off and on injured over the years. He's had some really great games and also some poor games. So I think Seton Hall will be the closest team to the bubble in the Big East. I've got them 8th, and if I missed Providence before, I've got Providence 5th. But there's no... As a Seton Hall guy, I'm not saying Holloway will lose his job after this year, but as a Seton Hall guy, that he might be feeling a little bit of the pressure if year 2 is not as good as year 1, which wasn't as good as they thought. So I like Seton Hall. I've been to a ton of their games over the years. It's 10, 15 minutes away from where I live. Like Georgetown, I think the Big East is better when Seton Hall is good because they've had some really great teams over the years, and I don't really think that they've had the tournament success to kind of match that. Their best team, maybe even national championship contenders, was in the year that there was no NCAA tournament. So if you could just get back to the tournament, I think Seton Hall will be on a good path.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Next team we'll go to just a little bit up north. St. John's Red Storm, 18-15 and 7-13 a year ago. The biggest name in the offseason. They've got Rick Pitino at the helm for year 1. They do lose a ton of players. Posh Alexander, we already talked about. Adaiwusu, we already talked about. AJ Storr, Joe Mead and I talked about yesterday to Wisconsin. David Jones and Andre Curbelo. They've got a ton of players gone, but they also replaced them all with transfers. Now, buckle up because there's a lot of them. Jordan Dingle from Penn, Dennis Jenkins from Iona, Naheem Aline from UConn, Chris Ledlam from Harvard, Glenn Taylor from Oregon State, R.J. Luis from UMass, Sean Conway from Virginia Military, Cruz Davis from Iona, Zubi Ejiofor from Kansas, and then 2 freshmen, and Saduku Abini Ayo also from Iona. So, Chuck, they've got the big guy at the helm. They've got a talented roster. How high should the expectations be for the Red Storm this year?
I think they should be high, in my opinion. When you have Rick Pitino as your head coach, you're expected to win. He went into Iona and just, he ran through the league. I mean, granted, he did lose that game against Ryder in the second round.
Iona also wasn't bad before he came.
That is a true statement. That is a true statement. I just think Rick Pitino wins. He's a great coach. I love the talent he brought in. Maybe that's just because I'm a MAC biased, but I think Dennis Jenkins is an unbelievable guard. I love Jordan Dingle. I love Chris Ledlam. I love Joel Soriano. He could potentially be one of maybe the second best big man in the Big East. The numbers that he put up last year were insane. They have a lot of guys, and Rick Pitino, I think he just gets his guys going, no matter what. And I expect them to win at least 20 games, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy at all. If you think about really all of the players that Pitino's had for more than a couple years, I mean, every single one of them is better. Way better. He gets everything out of his players that he can. In year 1 at Iona, he took them down the stretch with Alabama in the NCAA tournament. And then year 2, they get picked off. They were the best team in the conference that year by a mile. And then last year, they were leading the national champions at halftime. And he's got a really solid roster, and I think he's got enough players where if a couple of them don't work out, we'll use the other guys. He doesn't have to hit on all of them. And, Soriano's been there for a while. He averaged 15.2 and 11.9 last year. He's going to be a double-double machine. And, just an hour before we started recording, ESPN did a live practice with St. John's, and Pitino said that he expects Dennis Jenkins to be a first-round pick in the NBA draft. Now that might be a little bit optimistic,
Yeah.
but Jenkins was the one of the best players in the MAC over the years, and you've got all of these players coming in who are either the best players on their team or good players on good teams. So I have them sixth. I don't see them getting into the top four, but you come fifth in this Big East in year one. I think that's a tremendous success, and Patino won't be there for 12, 15 years because he's already in his 70s, but if he can be there for 3, 4 solid seasons, get him into the tournament a couple years in a row, they'll be back on track. Part of his contract is they're playing more games in the Garden this year, which is great for St. John's fans, great for the Big East, and I would be shocked if they don't make the tournament because they have the roster to sustain some injuries, and they don't have a terrible schedule even early on. You think with these teams that are put together with a lot of transfers that they might take some hits early, but you have a Michigan team at home, a West Virginia team on the road who lost their coach, and then you don't play anybody else in the Power Five in the non-conference. So there's a real chance that they could be undefeated going into January, and that's scary as a fan of any other team in the Big East. So we got two more left. We're going to go to the Villanova Wildcats. Last year they were 17-17 and 10-10. They were sixth in the conference. They lost in the first round of the NIT. This is Kyle Neptune's second season in charge down there in Pennsylvania. They have a couple of big names that are no longer there. Caleb Daniels, Cam Whitmore, and Brandon Slater. But they do bring back some two really big contributors, Eric Dixon and Justin Moore. And then as a transfer haul, might be up there with one of the best. Tyler Burton from Richmond, TJ Bamba from Washington State, Akeem Hart from Maryland, and Lance Ware from Kentucky. So Chuck, year one did not go to plan for Kyle Neptune, but they should be back in the top. They're ranked in the top 25. They should be back to the old Villanova that we've saw for so many years under Jay Wright.
Yeah, I firmly believe that they will be. Um, you know, this the Villanova that we're used to seeing with Jay Wright. I think there's a very good possibility that they could end up in the top 10 of the AP poll by the end of the year. They bring back experience. They bring in an unbelievable transfer class. Um, I just Kyle Neptune. I think he will be a good coach, and I think he will get this team rolling this year. It's just looking through this conference and every single team, and we haven't even talked about we're just talking about Villanova, and it's like this is just another great team that could win the conference. They're so loaded. They have a lot of great talent, and it's just remarkable how loaded this conference is, and I think Villanova is going to have an unbelievable year. I think Justin Moore. I don't know what he could do, but I don't know if this is too much of a hot take, but I think he could win Player of the Year. I think he's that great of a player, and everybody talks about his work ethic and how great of a leader and player he is, and I think he can contribute at the highest level and lead these guys to a lot of victories and maybe get this team to a 2-3 seed in the NCAA tournament. So
Yeah, last year they just really struggled early on, and Moore wasn't even a part of that team. He was recovering from
mhm.
his ACL from the year before. So, you take that second half of the Big East Villanova team last year, they're probably a top 25 team in the country. They were rolling until they played UConn, and then
Mhm.
UConn kind of punched them in the face and took all their momentum away. But if Jay Wright was a coach, I think they'd be first in the poll. That's how good their team is, and
Yeah.
they'll have their opportunities early. They host Maryland. They've got Texas Tech on a neutral. They got Kansas State away, and they've got UCLA at home. Now that is a crazy tough stretch there to end the non-conference season, and they go right into Creighton away to start out the Big East. So they have no, they have like 4 games that they're supposed to win by more than 10, and that's a little scary from a Villanova point of view. Is that, you know, if you start off poorly, you're going to lose some games because you're playing some great teams. But if they hit the ground running, they'll be. I mean, if we talk around Christmas time when the Big East tournament or when the Big East season starts and they're, 6-1 or 7-0, we're gonna be like, this team's gonna win the conference. I've got them 4th, and just a little bit of hesitancy to put them a little higher because of what happened last year, but they've got every opportunity to be protected seed come NCAA tournament, and a lot to be excited about, but also a couple things to be nervous about for Villanova. So the final team we have here before we go into some player stuff is the Xavier Musketeers. They were 27-10 and 15-5 last year. They were second in the Big East. It's Sean Miller's second season at the Cintas Center. They do lose a ton of players from a year ago. Sule Boom has graduated. Colby Jones is gone. Jack Nungy is gone. And Adam Kunkel is gone. Those are 4 players that all average double digits. And the other starter that they have, Zach Fremantle, is injured and might miss the entire season. So a lot of changes going into Xavier this year. They do bring in a number of transfers, and 7 freshmen are listed here. So a lot of change for Xavier, but year 1 of Sean Miller was great. What do you think the expectations for year 2 are going to be?
Uh, Man, it's hard to say because you look at the roster this year and it's definitely a lot weaker. Obviously you see Zach Fremantle um, on the roster, but I think it's safe to say you could essentially take him off the roster. I don't think that he will be playing this year. You know, they do have some guys that are interesting. I'm hearing a lot of great things about their freshman, Djokovic. I think Davion McKnight, he's he's gonna be a player for sure in the Big East. I think, he's he's a really good guard. But I can't say there's a lot of definites other than, maybe him. I think Desmond Claude is gonna have a good um sophomore jump. When we played him last year, I was really impressed with how he played. He might not have put up the biggest numbers, but for him to play like that as a freshman, was really impressive to me. So if he can step up and really establish himself in a supporting role, or even step up and become, one of the top 3 main guys, top 2 main guys, then that would be huge for them. But you know, I know having Sean Miller as your coach definitely helps. And I think he is going to pull together some wins because he's Sean Miller and he knows how to win basketball games. But looking at the roster, I'm not too intrigued by this team. So
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they put it together. But if you remember last year, Sule Boom as a transfer was not really on the radar as some like super impact player. He was going to be their point guard, and he was pretty solid at UTEP. I think that's where he was, and he
yeah,
turned into probably the best transfer last year. He averaged like 16 points a game, and he was great. So I wouldn't rule out any of these transfers being really awesome because I like you said, McKnight should be really good. He was good on Western Kentucky before, but a couple of these other guys and I wouldn't rule anything out for Xavier, even though that it might not look great. So far, you have basically one player from your rotation who's back, because Jerome Hunter's injured too, and probably is going to be out for most of the year, if not all of it. So there's a lot to be worried about, but you've got some players in there, and they do play Purdue on the road in the Gavitt games and Houston at home. So you might see a couple losses there, but other than that, you've got some opportunities to get your rotation set with a couple of high 200s and low 300s opponents, and I don't think it's out of the question that they make the tournament this year. I would lean towards no, but Sean Miller has done a lot more with a lot less. And
Oh,
he's another one of those coaches that did not lose his job because of performance related. He lost it because of the violations that they faced, but at Arizona, that is, and he was Xavier coach before that. But I have them seventh, and it was kind of the last team that I put in just because there's not much. All right, they should not be caught up in the bottom of the conference. They should be able to at least put together a 8-12 conference season, and if they pick off a Houston or something, then maybe they make the tournament. But it is going to be a gauntlet this year, and there are going to be some stretches of games for teams in this conference that are ugly to look at. Just away against some great teams and home against some great teams. So you might see some good teams lose 4 or 5 in a row here, but it is like I would say it's like the Big 12 has been over the past couple years with just how many tough games there are and how many, a 7-13 team could make the tournament just because of how, many good games there are. But we're going to move into our predictions for the all conference teams. I've got a first team here, Chuck. I don't think any of these names should surprise you. I've got Bryce Hopkins, Tyler Kolek, Justin Moore, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and Joel Soriano. I would be shocked if the player of the year comes from a name that I didn't just say. I think each of them have a chance, but it seems to be down to those 5 for me.
yeah, I mean, I would be shocked as well. For sure. I mean, can Tyler Kolek do it? 2 years in a row, right? He won Player of the Year last year.
Yeah, I
Um,
believe so.
you know, that's obviously a big question, and I it's hard to say. There's a lot of good players. There's these 5 players that are really great. It's man, player of the year, the player of the year, preseason player of the year, whoever you choose. It's a tough one, and if you choose one of those 5 guys, you're probably going to be right, like you said. Man, I feel like the safe bet probably would be Tyler Kolek, just because of what he did last year, and especially the supporting cast that he has around him at Marquette is so similar to last year with his most of his their starting 5 returning. But again, like I said before, I wouldn't really be surprised if Justin Moore could win Player of the Year. He has a really strong team, great supporting cast. It's crazy to call those other people supporting cast because they could be superstars on their own team. Um, you know, so I think those would probably be my top 2 choices, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I'm going with Hopkins. I really liked how he played last year,
mhm.
and he kind of willed them to the tournament. They weren't like a spectacular team a year ago, but he's going to be their guy, and he's just such an issue to game plan against because of he is 6'9", and he's got a really good jumper, but he also is big enough to guard your 5. So I'm going with him, but Zach Edey will probably be the national player of the year, but there are going to be a ton of Big East guys in that 2 to 5 to 7 range. You know, barring an Edey injury, he's going to get it, but there'll be a lot of Big East guys who are at least there because they don't just say who gets first. So I'm going with Hopkins, but every team has got a player that's capable. Every team that should make the tournament has a player capable of winning Player of the Year, and I don't think that we can say that in any other conference. But my second team here is Eric Dixon of Villanova, Oso Ighodaro of Marquette, Trey Alexander of Creighton, Donovan Clingan of UConn, and Kadari Richmond of Seton Hall. Now, I think these players are either the second best player on one of the better teams or the best player on some of these lower teams. So these players may be more key to their team's success than those we mentioned in the first team, Chuck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, I know we talked about UConn a lot earlier, but I think Donovan Clingan, the jump that he's going to make this year is going to be very significant. And, I could see him potentially making the first team, if he gets enough minutes and he produces at the level that he did last year. He very well could make all Big East first team. Um, so, you know, so a couple other a couple other of those guys, obviously they're intriguing, they're very talented. But you know, the one name that definitely stuck out to me was Donovan Clayton because I think he really has the potential to make that first team jump. So
Yeah, it was between Soriano and him for me in the last spot of the first team, and I just gave it to Soriano because I think the coach of the year will be Rick Pitino. It seems like if any of these first year guys do well, they're probably going to get it. It just seems like,
hmm
I mean, Shaka last year was year two, but if you don't really have expectations or your expectations could go either way, I think Pitino will be the coach of the year, but that's really harsh on McDermott and Shaka and Hurley. Hurley may have a team as good as last year, and they won the national championship, but I really think there's six coaches who could be coach of the year, and I don't think that that's crazy at all. But my pick is Pitino. Who have you got?
I would probably pick Patino as well. Um, you know, I think the most Rick Pitino thing that could happen is he comes into the Big East and then just so happens to win the conference. And in that case, he's a shoo-in to be, coach of the year. I think there's no question about that. Even, a top three, top four, he'll win coach of the year, no question. But um, you know, regardless of record this year, just watching him coach on the sidelines, he's just such an unbelievable coach. And like you said, he always gets the best out of his guys. When we played Iona 2 years ago, he started somebody that wasn't even on the scouting report, and somehow he drilled, two threes against us, and he looked like one of the better players on that Iona roster. And I don't think he played another minute that year, but for some reason he just started him against us, and that's just how Rick Pitino does things. He wills his guys to play to the best of their ability. And when guys get their opportunity, they're going to step up for them. So I think he's going to will, a lot of wins out of that team, and for that reason, he would be my pick for coach of the year as well. So
And before we wrap it up, we ended with one thing yesterday, and it was predictions if any coaches will be fired this year, and I'm gonna go with none. I think there's one that is a maybe, and if a coach does get hired at another school, that doesn't count as getting fired. I think Tony Stubblefield is the only one that has to worry even a little bit about his job security beyond this year, because the other teams at the bottom have a coach in either year one or year two, and you're not gonna do that based on performance. But I really can't see it. Now we went over three or four names that could go in the Big Ten, but anyone else have to worry other than Stubblefield?
I don't think so, and I think it's going to take a lot for Tony Stubblefield to get fired. I think he is really well respected in the business, and I think people understand that it is hard to win at DePaul. So, maybe he will get, another year, and hopefully he does get another year. But I think it would have to take them maybe winning 4 or 5 games for him to really be considered to be fired. I think, depending on Butler this year and how well they do, if they have a really poor year, I don't think Thad Matta would get fired. But I think next year he would be on the hot seat, for sure.
Yeah, I would
Um,
have to leave. I mean, it's only year three for Tony Stubblefield, I
yeah,
think. So, you will give him another year.
yeah,
Basically, if you win, 7 or 8 games. But
yeah,
Mata, I could see him resigning. Like, the reason why he left Ohio State was from health issues, and he was out of the game for a little bit. And athletic director, there's no doubt that he can coach, but he did come back into coaching. I would think he'd give it another chance. Butler will give him another chance because they've been struggling since Chris Holtmann was their coach, other than a couple years there with LaVall Jordan. But I'm going to say 0. I don't think any will go. I said 3 in the Big Ten, or 2. I don't remember. But that's a testament to how good the conference is, because if you have a bad season, you could just write that off to being a okay team in a really good league.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
that's all we have for you tonight. Thank you for tuning in to the Big East preview. Be sure to check out all the posts that are going to come along with it, our predictions and stuff like that. Mike and I will be on tomorrow for the Big 12. Thanks, Chuck, for coming on, and we